In this lecture, we are discussing how does a conversational action work with the Google Assistant. And you can read more about this by going to the documentation for the Google Assistant for developers, which is at developers.google.com/assistant. So, a conversational action. A conversational action extends the functionality of the Google Assistant. So we as developers can create custom experiences or conversations that our users can use on the assistant. In a conversation, the conversational action will handle requests from the assistant and return responses with audio and visual components. So if a user asks, hey, open the app and play music from the app, then the conversational action will handle that request. Conversational actions can also connect to external services before returning a response. For example, if your user is asking how many bikes are available to rent today from this company, then the conversational action can connect to the external service, being the company or Google, perhaps, to add that extra logic before it can return a response. One example is users can invoke our conversational action to get a response from an external fulfillment service if they want to look up information or get a recommendation or make a payment. So a user will say something like, okay, Google, let's talk to an app. And then the assistant is going to be the third party or middle party that is allowing you to connect with the app hands-free. Some use cases for conversational actions. Typically, a conversational action will fall into one of three categories. An action that can be accomplished that people can easily answer, like what time is my flight? A quick but useful action, such as finding out what time is it? An action that is better for voice, that you'd want to do hands-free, like start a timer or set an alarm. A conversational action uses your user to interact with the assistant. So behind the scenes, the conversational action has to interpret the voice and be able to understand what the user is asking. So there's natural language processing that's happening. A conversational action begins when the user wants it to begin and will continue until the user exits or the action figures out that it's the end, because the user is likely not saying anything else. During the conversation, user inputs are converted from speech to text behind the scenes and transformed into a JSON request. So this JSON request contains what the user wants to do, like turn on a light bulb. That will be converted from just words spoken to a JSON request. Then the request is sent to conversation fulfillment. Conversation fulfillment parses the user's query into data, processes the data, and returns a webhook JSON response to the assistant. The assistant will then process and present the response to the user. So the conversation input could be turn on a light bulb. Then that will be processed and returned as a webhook response. The response is then used by the assistant to present the response to the user, such as light bulb turned on. Right, so in this way, we can use the natural language processing that's available for us by the Google Assistant for developers. Right, so feel free to read more here at Google Developers. Coming up next, we're going to build an action together. So we're going to build an action in our Google Actions console. Right, and then we'll continue on from there. So part of the Google Assistant are intents and invocation, because when a user wants to do something, they have to have an intent. That's their intent, and they have to invoke their intent when they want to engage with an action. So if they want to turn on a light bulb, they have to say that. There are explicit invocations and implicit invocations. So sometimes the invocations are explicit, like, hey Google, talk to the app, or implicit versus, hey Google, book an appointment to fix my bike. So in this case, the assistant would have to figure out which app to use. Invocation phrases are used by the assistant to figure out what to do, such as, what time is it, or what's the current price of gold? The Google Assistant will take that phrase and recognize it to figure out what the user wants to do. Right, so first you have the intent and invocation of the action, then you have to build the fulfillment. So the fulfillment actually allows you to perform the action. So if the user wants to turn on a light bulb, your fulfillment has to turn on the light bulb and possibly say to the user back, okay, I turned it on. Right, so that is an overview of how a conversational action works, how your user converses with the Google Assistant or talks to the Google Assistant in order to fulfill a task. If you liked this video, then go to training.mammoethinteractive.com. We have tons more content on blockchain, web development, machine learning, and much more. We also have a membership for just $19 a month where you can get access to our 372 course bundle and counting.